I was in the middle of a Tuesday morning meeting when my phone buzzed with my cousin Rachel's name. I ignored it. She called again, then texted, "Urgent. Aunt Margaret sold Grandpa's barn. Closing tomorrow. You need to see this." My stomach dropped. Grandpa's barn, the old red structure on the property where I'd spent every childhood summer, learning to fix tractors, stack hay, and listen to his stories about working the land. He'd passed away 8 months earlier, leaving his small farm to my Aunt Margaret, his eldest daughter. My dad, his son, had died years before, so I got nothing but memories. I left the meeting, called Rachel back. "What do you mean she sold it?" "The whole property. Some developer bought it, wants to tear down the barn and build townhouses. Closing is tomorrow at noon." I felt sick. Grandpa had loved that barn. Built it himself in 1962 with his own hands and borrowed money. Every board, every nail, every beam had a story, and Margaret was selling it to developers who'd demolish it without a second thought. "Did you tell her to wait?" I asked. "She won't listen to me. You know how she is, everything is about money. The developer offered $30,000 over asking. She jumped at it." I did know how she was. Margaret had always seen the farm as a burden, something that kept Grandpa from living his life. She'd tried for years to convince him to sell, move to a condo, enjoy retirement. He'd refused, saying the land was his life. "I'm driving up there now," I decided. It was a 3-hour drive from my office to the farm. "Tell her not to sign anything until I get there." "Jake, she won't care. In her mind, it's done." Rachel was probably right, but I had to try. That barn wasn't just wood and nails, it was Grandpa's legacy, and I couldn't let it die without at least saying goodbye. I called my wife Sarah from the road explaining the situation. She understood immediately. She'd met Grandpa several times before he died, loved his stories, knew how much that farm meant to me. "Do what you need to do," she said. "I'll handle things here." The 3-hour drive felt eternal. I kept replaying memories. Learning to drive Grandpa's old pickup in the barn's dirt lot. Hiding in the hayloft reading books while he worked below. The smell of hay and oil and old wood that defined that place. Grandpa had been 89 when he died. Sharp-minded until the end, though his body had worn out from decades of hard work. The funeral had been simple, attended by neighbors and old friends who'd known him for 50 years. Margaret had been businesslike, already talking about settling the estate before we'd even lowered the casket. I pulled into the farm's gravel drive just before sunset. The house looked emptier than I remembered. Margaret had already cleared out most of Grandpa's belongings, holding an estate sale that I'd missed because of work. The barn stood in the distance, red paint faded but structure still solid. Margaret's Mercedes sat in the driveway. I parked beside it, took a breath, and knocked on the farmhouse door. She answered, looking annoyed. "Jake, Rachel said you were coming. There's nothing to discuss. The sale is final. Can I at least see the barn one more time, before it's gone?" She checked her watch. "Fine, 20 minutes. I have dinner plans." 20 minutes to say goodbye to a lifetime of memories. It wasn't enough, but it was all I had. I walked toward the barn as the sun set behind it, casting long shadows across the property. The old door still creaked the same way, the smell still the same mixture of hay and thyme. I stepped inside, overwhelmed by how much it felt like Grandpa was still there. And then I noticed something I'd never seen before. The barn's interior was mostly empty. Margaret had sold off the equipment, the tools, everything of obvious value. But the structure remained. The loft above, the stalls below, the hand-hewn beams Grandpa had shaped himself. I walked through, touching wood, remembering. That's when I saw it. In the back corner, partially hidden by a remaining stack of old lumber, was a ladder I'd never noticed before. It led up to a small section of the loft that had always been blocked off, covered with boards. But now, some of those boards had been removed, revealing an opening. Had Margaret's estate sale people done this, searching for valuables? I climbed the ladder carefully. It was sturdy despite its age. The loft smelled of dust and old hay. The evening light coming through the high windows cast everything in gold. The small sectioned-off area was maybe 8 feet by 8 feet, and in the center, covered with a tarp, was something rectangular and large. My heart pounded as I pulled back the tarp. Underneath was an old wooden chest, the kind you'd see in antique stores with metal reinforcements and a heavy padlock. Taped to the top was an envelope yellowed with age. My name was written on it in Grandpa's distinctive handwriting. For Jake. Open when you're ready to understand. I stared at it, hands shaking. How long had this been here? Why had Grandpa hidden it? And why leave it for me specifically? I tried the padlock, firmly secured. The chest wasn't opening without a key or bolt cutters. The envelope, however, wasn't sealed. Inside was a single piece of paper, a letter from Grandpa dated 3 months before he died. Jake, if you're reading this, it means you cared enough to come back one last time. Inside this chest is something I've kept hidden for 60 years, something Margaret can never know about. Find the key. It's where we used to watch sunsets together. You'll know what to do. Love, Grandpa. I read the letter twice, my mind racing. Where we used to watch sunsets together. Grandpa and I had a ritual during my childhood summers. Every evening around this time, we'd climb up to the barn's highest point, a small platform he'd built on the roof, and watch the sun go down over the fields while he told stories. I hadn't been up there in 20 years. Wasn't even sure the platform was still safe. But if Grandpa said the key was there, I had to look. I found the old exterior ladder on the barn's side, tested its weight, and climbed. The platform was still there, weathered but solid, and tucked into a gap between 2 boards, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small brass key. My hands trembled as I climbed back down and returned to the loft. The key slid into the padlock smoothly, clicked open. I lifted the heavy lid and looked inside. What I found took my breath away. The chest was full of documents, photographs, and a leather-bound journal. But most striking were the bundles of cash. Old bills, neatly stacked and wrapped. I didn't count them, but there had to be thousands of dollars there. Underneath the money were deeds, certificates, and what looked like stock certificates from the 1960s. The journal was on top, another note from Grandpa paperclipped to the cover. Jake, this is the story I never told anyone. Not your grandmother, not your father, not Margaret. Read it, and you'll understand why some secrets have to stay buried. But they're your secrets now. I heard Margaret's voice from below. Jake, time's up. I need to lock the barn. I quickly closed the chest, replaced the tarp, and climbed down. My mind was spinning. What had Grandpa hidden? Why? And what was I supposed to do with whatever secret this was? Did you get your closure? Margaret asked, sounding impatient. Yes, I lied. Thank you for letting me see it. She locked the barn door, pocketed the key. The new owners take possession tomorrow. Don't come back here, Jake. It's not yours anymore. But she was wrong. Part of it would always be mine. I drove to Rachel's house. She lived 30 minutes away and had offered me her guest room. Over coffee, I told her everything. She stared at me, eyes wide. A hidden chest? Money? Secret documents? This sounds like a movie. I need to get back in there before the sale closes. Tonight. Rachel hesitated. That's breaking and entering. Margaret would call the cops. It's not breaking if I have permission from the actual owner. Grandpa left it for me. The chest, the contents, all of it. Margaret doesn't even know it exists. We argued for an hour, but Rachel finally agreed to help. She knew the property better than anyone, had house sat for Grandpa for years. She knew about the loose board on the barn's north side, the one Grandpa had never properly fixed, because he liked having an emergency entrance. We returned to the farm at midnight. Margaret's car was gone, probably still at her dinner plans. The house was dark. We parked a quarter-mile away and walked through the fields, using flashlights sparingly. The loose board was exactly where Rachel remembered. We pried it open, slipped inside. The barn was darker than I'd expected, our flashlights creating strange shadows. I felt like a thief, which was ridiculous since I was claiming what Grandpa had explicitly left for me. Back up in the loft, I opened the chest again. This time, I took everything. The journal, the documents, the photographs, even the money. I stuffed it all into a backpack Rachel had brought. The chest itself was too heavy and obvious to remove, but its contents were mine now. We were almost back to the loose board when we heard a car. Headlights swept across the barn's exterior. Rachel grabbed my arm, panic in her eyes. "Margaret!" We froze, listening. A car door opened, closed, footsteps on gravel, then silence. After 5 agonizing minutes, the car drove away. We didn't waste time. We slipped out through the loose board, replaced it as best we could, and ran through the darkness back to Rachel's car. Back at Rachel's house, I spread everything on her dining room table. The money alone was shocking. I counted it quickly, came up with nearly $40,000 in old bills. But the documents were even more interesting. Deeds to properties I'd never heard of, stock certificates from companies long defunct or merged into larger corporations, and official-looking papers in languages I couldn't read. The journal was what I really wanted to understand. I opened it to the first page, dated April 1958. Today I did something I'm not proud of, but it was necessary. I've started keeping this record because I need to remember why I made the choices I made, even if I can never tell anyone. I read through the night while Rachel dozed on the couch. What unfolded was a story I'd never imagined about my grandfather. In 1958, he'd been 32 years old, newly married to my grandmother, working as a farmhand for a wealthy landowner. He dreamed of owning his own farm but had no money and no prospects. Then he'd stumbled onto something. His employer, a man named Rutherford Clayton, was running an illegal gambling operation on the side, high-stakes poker games in a barn, much like the one Grandpa would later build. Grandpa discovered this by accident when he stayed late one night fixing equipment. Clayton caught him, threatened him, but then made an offer. "Work for me on the side, help run these games, keep your mouth shut, and I'll cut you in for 20%. Refuse or talk and you'll disappear." Grandpa, desperate and scared, agreed. For 3 years he worked those illegal games, watching wealthy men lose fortunes, helping Clayton rake in thousands of dollars a week. Grandpa's share accumulated, more money than he'd ever seen, money he couldn't tell anyone about because revealing its source meant admitting to serious crimes. In 1961, Clayton died in a car accident. Before he died, he'd apparently told Grandpa, "The money's yours. Nobody else knows about it. Take it and disappear, or stay and invest it. Just keep your mouth shut." Grandpa's journal documented what happened next with painful honesty. He'd taken Clayton's death as a chance to escape. He bought the land that would become his farm with cash, told everyone he'd gotten a loan from a bank in the next county, built the barn himself, keeping costs low, using the illegal money carefully over years. "I tell myself I'm using dirty money to create something clean," he wrote in 1962. "A farm where I'll work honestly, raise a family with values, never go back to that life. But guilt eats at me. Every board I nail feels like building on sin." The journal entries became less frequent over the years, but never stopped completely. Grandpa documented every dollar he spent from Clayton's money, every investment he made. Some of the stock certificates I'd found were from companies he'd invested in during the 60s, companies that had grown massively over the decades. "I've turned 40,000 of Clayton's dollars into nearly 200,000 through careful investment," he wrote in 1975. "None of it is in my name. Everything's in trusts, offshore accounts, careful structures that prevent anyone from tracing it back. If I die, it all disappears. Maybe that's what should happen. Let the secret die with me." But he hadn't let it die. He'd left it for me. Why? The answer came in an entry from 2019, just months before he died. Jake is 45 now, working a job he hates, struggling with mortgage payments, trying to give his kids the life I gave his father. He's a good man who's been dealt a bad hand. Margaret will inherit the farm because that's proper. Eldest child gets the property. But the secret money, the Clayton fortune I've carefully hidden and grown, that's for Jake. He'll judge me for how I got it, but maybe he'll forgive an old man's mistakes if it helps his family. I sat back, overwhelmed. Grandpa had carried this guilt for 60 years, built his entire life on a foundation of dirty money he'd slowly tried to clean through honest work and smart investment. And now he'd passed that burden and that opportunity to me. Rachel woke up, saw my face. "You okay?" I wasn't sure how to answer. I explained everything to Rachel over breakfast. She listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to understanding to concern. When I finished, she said exactly what I was thinking. "What are you going to do with it?" That was the question. I had approximately $40,000 in old cash, stock certificates that might be worth a fortune or might be worthless, and documents relating to properties and investments I'd need a lawyer to understand. All of it obtained through illegal gambling operations 60 years ago. Legally, is it even mine? I wondered aloud. Can you inherit money that was obtained illegally? Rachel pulled out her laptop, started researching. After an hour of reading various legal sites, her conclusion was, it's complicated. Technically, if the original crime was that long ago and everyone involved is dead, you might be clear. But you'd need a lawyer who specializes in this kind of thing. I thought about my life. Sarah and I were drowning in debt. Mortgage, student loans from our kids' college, medical bills from her father's long illness. I worked 60-hour weeks at a job I'd stopped enjoying years ago, all to barely keep our heads above water. This money could change everything. But it was dirty. Built on illegal gambling that had probably ruined lives, people who'd lost fortunes at Clayton's tables. Grandpa had felt guilty about it for 60 years. Did I want to carry that same weight? He did try to clean it, Rachel pointed out. Invested it honestly, paid taxes on the investment gains. The original sin was 60 years ago. What you'd be inheriting is decades of legitimate investment growth. She had a point. The $40,000 in cash was one thing, but the stocks and investments represented money that had been legally earned through market growth. Grandpa's guilt had been about the seed money, not what that seed had grown into. I decided to take it step by step. First, find out what the stocks and documents were actually worth. Second, consult with a lawyer about the legal implications. Third, if it was truly mine to claim, decide whether to keep it or find some way to atone for its origins. I took Monday off work and met with a financial advisor Marcus recommended, someone discreet who specialized in inherited assets. His name was David Chen, and his office was in a nondescript building that screamed, "We keep secrets." I brought the stock certificates, the documents, and Grandpa's careful records of every investment. David studied them for 2 hours, occasionally making notes, sometimes pulling up information on his computer. His expressions ranged from intrigued to impressed to occasionally shocked. Finally, he sat back. "Mr. Patterson, your grandfather was either very lucky or very smart. Probably both." He showed me his calculations. The stock certificates were from companies that had either been absorbed into larger corporations or had split and grown exponentially over the decades. These certificates, properly claimed and accounting for splits and mergers, represent approximately $1.2 million in current value. My vision blurred. $1.2 million from Grandpa's careful investment of Clayton's dirty gambling money over 60 years. "The offshore accounts are trickier," David continued. "Your grandfather was smart about structure. Everything's in trusts that avoid most tax implications. These accounts have grown to approximately $800,000. $2 million. Nearly $2 million that Grandpa had hidden away, grown slowly, kept secret from everyone for 6 decades. And he'd left it all for me. Can I legally claim this?" I asked. David considered. That's really a question for a lawyer. But from a financial perspective, if you can prove inheritance and these assets are properly documented, which they are, your grandfather was meticulous, then yes, you could claim them. There would be some inheritance tax, some paperwork, but it's doable. I sat in my car for 30 minutes after leaving his office, just processing. $2 million. Enough to pay off every debt, secure my kids' futures, quit my soul-crushing job, maybe even buy back Grandpa's farm from those developers. But the question remained. Should I? Could I live with money that had started as the proceeds of illegal gambling? Or had Grandpa's 60 years of careful stewardship truly cleaned it? I told Sarah everything that evening. We sat on our back porch while the kids were at practice, and I laid out the whole story. Grandpa's secret past, the hidden money, the moral complexity, the stunning amount it had grown to. Sarah listened quietly, asked clarifying questions, but didn't interrupt with judgment. When I finished, she sat thinking for several minutes. Finally, she said something that shifted my entire perspective. Your grandfather spent 60 years feeling guilty about this money. He could have used it, could have lived a much easier life given your dad advantages, helped your grandmother when she got sick. But he didn't touch it because he felt it was tainted. She looked at me directly. He left it to you because he trusted you to use it in ways he never could, to not let guilt paralyze you the way it paralyzed him. But it's still dirty money. It was dirty money 60 years ago. What is it now? Your grandfather paid taxes on every investment gain. He never used it for himself. He essentially laundered it through time and legal investment. What you're inheriting isn't gambling proceeds. It's the legitimate growth of carefully invested capital over 6 decades. I wanted to believe her, but I kept thinking about the people who'd lost money at Clayton's tables, the lives possibly ruined. What if we used some of it to make amends? Sarah suggested. Find charities that help gambling addicts, programs that support people struggling with debt. Use part of the money to address the original sin. That felt right. A way to honor Grandpa's guilt while not being paralyzed by it. We spent the rest of the evening planning. We'd claim the inheritance, working with lawyers to ensure everything was legal. We'd set aside 30% for taxes and legal fees. Of the remainder, we'd give 20% to charities addressing gambling addiction and poverty. The rest would secure our family's future. Your grandfather wanted you to have this, Sarah said. Honor that by using it wisely. The next morning, I called David Chen and told him to proceed with claiming the assets. Then I called a lawyer he recommended who specialized in inherited assets with complicated origins. The process would take months, but I was committed. I knew I'd have to tell Margaret eventually. She might have sold the barn, but legally, anything Grandpa had explicitly left to me was mine regardless of property ownership. Still, I dreaded the conversation. She'd be furious about being left out, about the secret, about everything. The barn sale had closed. The developers were scheduled to demolish it in 2 weeks. I arranged to meet Margaret at a diner, neutral ground where she couldn't yell too loudly. She arrived looking suspicious, probably wondering why I'd insisted on meeting. Margaret, Grandpa left me something he kept hidden in the barn. I explained about the chest, the contents, though I downplayed the financial value. It was mostly documents, some family history, things he wanted me to have. Her face went through several emotions. Surprise, anger, suspicion, then calculation. Documents? What kind of documents? Personal stuff. Letters. Records. Nothing that affects the estate settlement. If it was on the property when I sold it, it belongs to the new owners. She was already preparing to lawyer up. Actually, it doesn't. Grandpa's will was clear. Personal effects designated for specific individuals aren't part of the property sale. I've already checked with a lawyer. This was half true. The lawyer had said it would depend on specifics, but Margaret didn't need to know that. She studied me, clearly trying to decide if there was money involved that she could claim a share of. How much is it worth? Sentimentally? Priceless? Financially? Not much. Another half-truth. If you're lying to me, Jake, if there's money you're hiding, there's no money, Margaret. Complete lie this time. Just Grandpa's personal history. Things he wanted me to know about his life before he became the man we knew. She didn't entirely believe me, I could tell, but without specifics, she couldn't prove anything. Fine. But if I find out you took anything of value from that property, I'll sue. There's nothing to sue over. I got what Grandpa left me. You got the farm and everything saleable on it. We're even. We weren't, not really, but she'd gotten $250,000 from the farm sale. I couldn't feel too guilty about inheriting something she'd never known existed. 2 weeks later, Rachel called me. They're demolishing the barn tomorrow. Thought you might want to see it one last time. I drove up that evening, parked on the road near the property. The developers had posted no trespassing signs, but I could see the barn from a distance. It looked smaller than I remembered, more vulnerable. Tomorrow, machinery would tear it down, and all that would remain would be memories. But those memories were strong. Every summer of my childhood, every lesson Grandpa taught me, every story he told while we worked together. I thought about the money, the secret, the complicated legacy he'd left me. In a strange way, the barn's destruction felt appropriate. The physical structure would be gone, but what Grandpa had really built, his values, his attempt to atone for past mistakes, his faith in me, that would endure. The legal process had moved faster than expected. David Chen and the lawyers had worked efficiently. The stocks had been transferred, the offshore accounts had been claimed, and after taxes and fees, I'd inherited approximately $1.5 million. We'd set aside $300,000 for charity. The remaining $1.2 million was ours. We'd paid off our mortgage, our debts, set up college funds for the kids that were fully funded. Sarah was going back to school to finish the degree she'd abandoned when we had children. I'd given notice at my job and was exploring starting my own business, something meaningful, not just profitable. I'd also set up a scholarship at the local community college in Grandpa's name, the Thomas Patterson Farming Scholarship, for students pursuing agricultural studies or rural community development. It would be funded in perpetuity, helping young people who loved the land the way Grandpa had. I watched the barn as the sun set behind it one last time, the same sunset view Grandpa and I had shared from the roof so many years ago. The physical barn was ending, but the real barn, the one built of memories and lessons and love, that would never be demolished. "Thank you, Grandpa," I whispered. "I understand now." 6 months later, Sarah and I stood in front of a different barn. This one was on 20 acres we'd purchased an hour from the city, close enough for convenience, far enough to feel like countryside. It wasn't as grand as Grandpa's barn, but it was ours, bought with the money he'd left us. We'd converted part of it into a workshop where I was building furniture, a hobby turned business that gave me more satisfaction than my old corporate job ever had. The rest was being restored as an event space for the community. Local farmers could use it for meetings. 4-H groups could gather. Families could rent it for celebrations. We'd named it Clayton's Redemption Barn, a private joke that honored Grandpa's complicated history. The illegal gambling money that had started everything had been fully transformed through 60 years of Grandpa's guilt-driven stewardship and our careful use into something that served the community. I'd finished reading Grandpa's entire journal. The final entry, written days before he died, had brought tears to my eyes. I've lived my whole life trying to atone for 3 years of mistakes. I built an honest life on dishonest foundation, and the guilt never left. But Jake is different. He's pure in ways I never was. If he can take my burden and turn it into blessing, then maybe I didn't fail completely. Maybe redemption is possible after all. The barn demolition had been hard to watch, but necessary. That physical structure belonged to the past. This new barn represented the future, built on lessons learned, mistakes acknowledged, and the understanding that legacy isn't about perfection, but about making the best of what we're given. My kids came running out of the farmhouse we'd renovated, excited to show me something they'd found in the old shed. They were growing up with dirt under their fingernails and calluses forming on their hands from honest work. They knew their great-grandfather's story now. The whole story, complicated truth and all. "Dad, can we build a loft?" my daughter asked. "Like the one you told us about in Great-Grandpa's barn?" I smiled. "Yes, and maybe we'll hide something up there too. Something for your kids to find someday. Because that's what legacy really is. Not just passing down money or property, but passing down stories, values, and the courage to face complicated truths with honesty." Grandpa had given me more than financial security. He'd given me a lesson about redemption, about how past mistakes don't have to define the future, and about how trust, really trusting someone with your whole story, is the greatest inheritance of all. The barn stood ready for its new life, serving the community, hosting gatherings, building memories. And somewhere in the hayloft, I'd hidden a small chest of my own, containing the full story, Grandpa's journal, and a letter for whoever found it decades from now. This is how broken things get fixed and dirty things get clean, through time, intention, and love. Use it wisely. The sunset painted the barn in golden light, and I heard Grandpa's voice in my memory. "Jake, everything worth having starts somewhere small and grows with care. Even redemption." He was right. And his redemption was finally complete.